Hey guys, it's James Ratchford, your favorite Social Security lawyer. You probably know me from my internet presence doing such things as Whitewater and Politics. Or you may know me through my actual law practice, helping people get Social Security benefits. And perhaps you come here through one of our ads. So, what I want to talk about today, and I'm going a little off script here because I want to make eye contact with the camera. I want to talk about a basic introduction to disability. So, what is disability? What do people mean when they say they're getting disability? And what does it take to get disability? By the way, I'm just looking at my picture here, and I apologize for my hair. Just got up in the morning here at a hotel in Tennessee. I'm on a trip for a hearing tomorrow, maybe doing some kayaking along the way, and forgot to bring it home into the hotel with me. So here I am. So what is disability? When people say, oh, I'm on disability, what do they mean? Well, there's actually 3 or 4 different programs that people are referring to when they say they're on disability. Now, the one that I deal with is Social Security disability. So that's going to be what we call SSD and SSI, and I'll go into a little bit of what those actually are. The first program that people are often talking about when they go on disability is they say workers' comp. Workers' comp is a benefit that is provided by your employer. Your employer pays into an insurance program that funds workers' comp benefits when they're needed. And your qualification for that is going to be directly through the workers' comp board. And that's based on your medical and based on your ability to perform that particular job. And it'll go for a limited period of time up to a final settlement that could cover lifetime benefits, but generally it's going to be finite in period. The next benefit that people will talk about when they say they're getting disability is private disability insurance. Now, private disability policies are provided by a lot of employers. It's a benefit from your employment that is funded voluntarily by your employer. There's no law that requires an employer to offer private disability benefits, but they are very commonly available. The standard for disability for that is usually just the inability to do that particular job. So it's very common that a person will qualify for workers' comp or private disability benefits and not qualify for Social Security disability. Now, the third category you might be hearing about when people say they're on disability is something like the Family Medical Leave Act. And that means that there's a lot of disability leaves that you can take where you're not actually getting paid. You're just simply out of work because of disability and nobody's paying you, you're just on your own, but that's still a form of disability. And actually a lot of people are in that situation for a very long time while they wait for their disability benefits to kick in because of how hard it's become to qualify for Social Security disability with the system that's in place, not so much because of the medical standard, but because of the way that standard is frequently applied. So, what is Social Security disability? We got 2 programs. We've got SSD and SSI. SSD, it stands for Social Security Disability or Social Security Disability Insurance. Sometimes it's called SSDI. And that program is based on your work history. It's based on what you've paid into the system over the time that you've been working. Every time you get a paycheck, part of that paycheck goes into Social Security taxes. Part of it's paid by you, part of it's paid by your employer. 12% of your earnings go into that. And out of that percentage, you're building into a trust fund, and your entitlement to that, it's not quite like a savings account, but your entitlement is partially proportional to what you've put in. It's a very complicated formula that I won't get into. So when you're paying into the system, you're qualifying for SSD. And as you're paying in, you're building your eligibility. You're only eligible for a couple years after you stop paying in, because there's a timeline attached to it. It's an insurance policy with a premium. So when your premium is paid up or is no longer paid up, you're no longer eligible. So what is the standard of disability for Social Security disability? When we say standard of disability, that's the legal standard, the legal rule that has to be met in order for you to qualify for the benefit. So the standard of disability for Social Security is not what people think it is. It is not you have to be in a wheelchair, you don't have to be an invalid, you don't have to be bedbound, you don't have to be stuck in your house all the time. You simply need to be unable to sustain competitive full-time work in the national economy. So what that's going to generally mean is a full-time job is not necessarily 9 to 5, but a full-time job, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that you have to be on task. You have to be able to stay on task for 85% of the workday. You have to be able to perform at a reasonable pace and get things done as your manager or supervisor expects them to get done. You have to be able to deal with the routine stresses of a workplace, including things like changes in the workplace. You need to be able to respond appropriately to supervisors, coworkers, and sometimes the general public. And you need to get there every day. You can't be absent more than 1 or 2 days a month in order to be able to sustain full-time employment. So those are the basic requirements of full-time employment, and we're generally talking about unskilled jobs. People who have skilled work or professional work or an advanced degree or a long resume may be able to get away with not performing a lot of those tasks. For instance, a salaried worker could easily take an extra break in the middle of the day of an hour or so if they make it up in the evening, or even if their performance is good enough that they can get away with working less than an 8-hour day routinely. So you can be able to work and be unable to work full time and therefore be able to qualify for Social Security. So for example, if you're only able to work part time because maybe you can't make it through an 8-hour day, but you could be productive for 3 or 4 hours, then you may be in a situation where you're only able to work part time and you're going to qualify for Social Security disability, even though the workforce isn't entirely off limits to you. And that's a situation that actually does happen a lot. Part-time work is not necessarily disqualifying from Social Security benefits. You can work and collect Social Security disability benefits, and again, be legitimately entitled under the law, as long as your work doesn't exceed a certain dollar amount, and that changes year to year. Right now it's about $1,200 a month. And if you're earning more than that, you're still technically disabled under the law, but you're not qualified for benefits because you've exceeded the threshold. Now, the other benefit has the same standard of disability. It's called SSI, and the only real difference between SSD and SSI is how the individual pays into them. With SSD, you pay in with your taxes. With SSI, what you pay in with your taxes doesn't matter. You may or may not have a significant work history. This often ends up being a benefit for people who didn't have enough of a work history to qualify for a full SSD benefit. So they're going to be people who are out of the workforce too young before they've really had a chance to establish their work history. They're going to be people who, for whatever reason, worked most of their career off the books and didn't pay into Social Security. Or they're going to be people who maybe got through their life without ever really working. One scenario that often becomes an SSI case is a non-working spouse after a divorce or becoming widowed has been out of the workforce her whole life for non-medical reasons that are legitimate, raising a family and that sort of thing. But that person becomes unable to provide for themselves when they are forced to enter the workforce at a later age and they're unable to. There's a little bit of nuance in these rules in that when you're over age 50, we don't necessarily have to rule out the full universe of unskilled work. You can also qualify just by being limited to a lower level of exertion than you're used to in your past work history. So a 50-year-old who can still do sedentary work, if they don't have that work in their background, can be disabled. And a 55-year-old who is limited from medium or heavy work down to light work can also be found disabled, but generally only if they have a work history of heavy or physical work. So there's a lot of things that can take you out of the workforce. So for example, if you are unable to get through 8 hours, that's the main one. Let's say you have back problems. Very common disabling injury is back problems. Well, if you have a severe back problem, you may not be able to get through 8 hours of sitting upright, as I am right now, even though I'm leaning a little on the table, standing up and walking. In order to do sedentary work, we consider that you have to be able to sit down for about 6 hours, maybe 7, and stand and walk for usually 2 hours is the standard, but some vocational experts will say you can get away with only being able to stand and walk for 1 hour. So at the bare minimum, you got to be able to stand and walk for an hour out of the day, and you got to be able to sit for the rest of the time. And not everyone can do that. You're only allowed a couple breaks in unskilled work. You're allowed a half-hour lunch break, which is unpaid, and you're allowed a 15-minute break each in the morning and afternoon, which are paid. Other than those breaks, you're really not allowed in unskilled work to take time off task. And again, this is something a lot of us skilled workers aren't really going to understand, because in our experience, our employers have been pretty tolerant of letting us take breaks, letting us go use the bathroom if we need to, letting us take a cigarette break. These are not things that are considered allowed. And if we talk to a vocational consultant, they're going to say that if you need those extra breaks, you're not going to be readily employable. And then we come to that percentage time on task. So let's say you have back problems. Well, you may not be able to sit for 6 hours a day without unreasonable levels of pain that are going to cause you to decompensate and be off task. So that's one way that back problems can cause a person to be disabled. They can't get through the 8 hours sitting, standing, and walking. Another way people commonly become disabled is time off task. Now, what's interesting is this is part of people's reality, but it's not often part of the actual legal decisions. We don't usually win on this basis, but it's often the truth of a person's life. You have to be on task for 85% of the day in order to sustain unskilled work. So a lot of people can't do that. For instance, mental health impairments. If you have a panic attack periodically, especially if it happens almost every day, which is likely in the workforce because you're going to have stressful circumstances, a panic attack that takes you off task for as little as 10 minutes in the course of a regular day, that's going to be disqualifying from work. If that happens on a regular basis, you're not going to be able to sustain a job, you're going to get fired, and you're going to be technically qualified for Social Security, even if we may not be able to get a judge to agree with us. Another thing that'll take you off task, well, again, you can imagine any number of medical problems that'll take a person off task, so I'll leave that to you. Another thing is absenteeism. If you're going to be absent from work more than 1 day a month, most employers are not going to tolerate that, at least not from an unskilled worker. Again, we get more latitude when we're skilled. As a lawyer, I can take off time whenever I want to and either make it up another time, or if all my work is done, nobody cares. But for a factory worker or a food service worker, that option is not going to be on the table. If you miss your shift more than once a month, you're going to get fired, and that's going to qualify you for Social Security benefits. A lot of reasons that can happen. A number of different kinds of medical conditions that have flare-ups. Things like MS, lupus, any kind of autoimmune disease. When you have a flare-up of those and you can't get out of bed in the morning, that's going to cause you to miss a day of work. And if that happens more than once a month, or for more than 1 day a month, you're going to be unable to sustain full-time employment. Another situation where that happens is, again, mental illness. With severe depression or anxiety, you're not going to be able to get out of bed consistently and get to work on time. It's not just being absent that'll disqualify you, it's being significantly late. I've seen people who, while depressed, were mostly able to work, but they had so much trouble getting out of bed in the morning that they were an hour or more to work almost every day for weeks in a row. And in those situations, those people got fired. And yes, if we get a qualified vocational expert involved, we can prove that those people are eligible for disability. Now, what I've been saying here is really to get one point across to you, which is that people who qualify for disability are not necessarily going to look disabled. And just because you see somebody who's not in a wheelchair, they're not on crutches, and yet they say they're collecting benefits, that does not mean that they're committing fraud or that they are manipulating the system. They very well may have an impairment that keeps them out of the workforce that you simply don't necessarily understand, and you probably don't even have that information, because chances are, if you're judging that person as a faker, you didn't take the time to ask them exactly what it is that goes on in their life that keeps them out of the workforce. So that's kind of an overview of what Social Security and disability mean. I often post a lot more details about it on my blog. If you want to check it out, there's a lot to learn. I'm also always open to question and answer. And finally, one reason this video is out here is you may at some point find yourself pursuing disability and you want to know, what does it mean and what's out there for me and what does it take? So these are what it takes. These ideas are what it takes to actually win a disability case when we can prove them. And proving them is the big deal. That's where you do want a qualified attorney on your side when you go to a hearing, because you want to be able to make sure that your story gets told and that your medical evidence is up to the completion level that it needs to be at. And of course, you can learn a lot more about that on my blog, on jamesratchford.com, and on my Facebook page. So thanks for watching. This is the first video, hopefully, of many. Give me feedback. Let me know what you think. And share it with other people. Again, I'm James Ratchford, disability attorney. You can find out about my practice at jamesratchford.com or on the Facebook page, James Ratchford Law. Thanks.